1, 0, all engine running.
In the vast expanse of space, one name shines brighter than the stars themselves. Neil Armstrong, the legendary astronaut who took humanity's first steps on the moon.
That's one small step for man.
Forever etching his name into the annals of history. For decades, the world revered him as a symbol of courage, exploration, and the indomitable spirit of mankind. But behind the veil of glory and achievement, a shroud of mystery and rumors still loom today about what the legendary astronaut really encountered when he stepped foot on the moon. Rumors that have captivated the imaginations of millions. And now, in an unprecedented turn of events, the Armstrong family has stepped forward to confirm what many have suspected all along. So join us on this journey through time and space as we peel back the layers of mystery to reveal these shocking revelations that remain buried for decades since that historical landing on the moon. On July 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong took his first historic steps on the moon, becoming the first man ever to set foot on its barren surface. The world watched in awe, celebrating this extraordinary achievement. But what lay hidden beneath the surface was more sinister and remained a secret that Neil Armstrong held closely until his death. Upon the team's return to Earth after a successful mission and shortly after their debriefing, rumors began to swirl that Armstrong in particular was holding back on the full extent of what he'd encountered during his brief sojourn on the moon. Whispers soon emerged that he had encountered something extraordinary during his lunar excursion, something he couldn't reveal to the world. And others have even wondered if the moon landing itself was an elaborate hoax orchestrated to hide a more profound truth. But these questions have remained unanswered, lost in the abyss of time up until now. But let's take you back in time for a while to give you the full picture of what unfolded at NASA before the historic lunar landing and how this truth we're about to uncover just adds up perfectly. You see, to embark on his monumental mission to the moon, Neil Armstrong had to dedicate over 3 years of his life to rigorous preparations. For context, in order to adapt to the weightless environment of space, he underwent a unique training regimen. One of his challenges was learning to walk sideways, which required him to be securely fastened and suspended at an angle. This peculiar training technique aimed to simulate the experience of maneuvering along the walls in a microgravity environment. And to endure the demanding conditions of space travel, Armstrong likewise subjected himself to a strict diet and sleep routine. He followed an intense regimen, consuming primarily dehydrated packages containing beef and vegetables. These specially prepared meals were designed to provide the necessary nutrients while being lightweight and easy to store in the spacecraft. During the early days of astronaut training, individuals had to undergo rigorous survival exercises in diverse environments, such as deserts, jungles, and open seas. The aim was to test their endurance and resourcefulness in extreme conditions. However, the training had a more adventurous and improvised approach for Armstrong's generation. Rather than structured programs, they were dropped into remote locations with minimal supplies and left to fend for themselves. The astronauts conducted most of their fieldwork in the American Southwest, specifically in the areas of Texas, Arizona, and Nevada. They chose these diverse locations to thoroughly understand various geological features they might encounter during their mission. According to Garber, their trainer, the astronauts received a combination of classroom and field training with a strong emphasis on the latter. NASA wanted to ensure that the astronauts developed muscle memory for the necessary steps so they could perform them instinctively while on the moon. And during their field training, the astronauts focused on essential tasks like photography and sample collection to minimize any time wasted on figuring out the procedures. They used their hands and small shovels to practice collecting and analyzing soil and rock samples at multiple sites. This repetitive training aimed to embed the process deeply within them, preparing them for the lunar environment. Moreover, the astronauts engaged in other simulations crucial to their mission. They dug trenches and gathered samples from different levels, honing their skills in site selection. They even mastered the art of driving core tubes into the soil to extract samples. and to effectively communicate their findings, they practiced describing geological features both verbally and in written format. Additionally, they received training in photography, ensuring they could accurately document the sites they explored. And lastly, they learned how to label and categorize the samples they collected, ensuring proper identification and organization. By undergoing this comprehensive and hands-on training, the astronauts developed a wide range of skills and knowledge to fulfill their mission on the Moon. The team's preparations also involved studying various geological formations to familiarize themselves with extraterrestrial landscapes. They likewise conducted extensive research and collected rock samples in the awe-inspiring depths of the Grand Canyon. They also explored ancient volcano formations within the Nevada National Security Site. Their investigations also led them to investigate gas and lava vents, lava lakes, and pit craters in captivating locations across Hawaii. This hands-on experience and knowledge acquisition aimed to equip Armstrong and his partners with a deeper understanding of the lunar surface and its potential challenges. And then finally, on July 20th, 1969, the day of Armstrong's historic journey to space, he was served a delicious breakfast consisting of steak, eggs, toast, juice, and coffee. The meal was carefully prepared to be easy on his digestive system, ensuring he wouldn't need to use the bathroom right after. After recognizing the benefits of practicing on moon-like environments, NASA decided to make analog missions a regular part of astronaut training for upcoming space voyages, including future Apollo missions. And yet, despite all the extensive training, everything seemed to go awry when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin encountered a critical issue during the landing sequence of Apollo 11. It all began when Armstrong, the commanding officer of Apollo 11, startled everyone in mission control with his sudden exclamation, "Program alarm." Standing beside Armstrong inside the descending lunar module, Buzz Aldrin stared at the frozen display on the computer screen, which showed the perplexing error code 1202. They were completely baffled about the source of this error. Frantically, the controllers in Houston scoured their records, desperately attempting to pinpoint the exact nature of the problem. Time was slipping away and they were running out of options. "Give us an update on that program alarm," Armstrong requested, his voice filled with tension. Though such scenarios were rehearsed in simulations, it was a difficult reality to accept that a life-or-death struggle was unfolding 386,000 kilometers away from Earth, inside a delicate and rapidly descending spacecraft. The communication link faltered and the computer seemed on the verge of shutting down at any moment. In the midst of this crisis, Gene Kranz, the flight director overseeing the historic lunar landing, sensed mission control slipping further into a state of urgency. The troubles began immediately upon the separation of the lunar module from the command module, which had transported Armstrong, Aldrin, and Michael Collins to the Moon. While Collins remained in the command module, Armstrong and Aldrin took the daring plunge toward the lunar surface. Unfortunately, mission control encountered difficulties with the radio connection to the lunar module, adding to the growing complexity of the situation. Aldrin had exhausted all his efforts, even trying to adjust the antenna's position. Mission control had also done everything they could on their part, but the radio connection stubbornly continued to fade in and out. If the situation worsened, Kranz would be compelled to order a halt to the mission. And while flight controllers on Earth wrestled with communication problems and unreliable radar data, an alarming sound echoed through the lunar module cabin, simultaneously triggering warning lights on the console in mission control. The landing computer indicated an overload signaled by the 1202 alarm on its interface. This alarm essentially meant I have too much to handle, so I'm going to pause, restart, and begin again. In such a scenario, mission protocols dictated an immediate termination of the mission, as their ability to navigate the landing would be jeopardized. The computer was receiving more data than it could effectively process. The turn of events had caught Aldrin off guard, mainly because he was unfamiliar with the specific code involved. "We couldn't consult the manual to identify the problem because we were focused on our destination," he exclaimed. Meanwhile, Neil Armstrong, after experiencing a brief period of tension, requested clarification from Houston. Back on Earth, controller Steve Bales gave the green light to proceed if the alarm appeared irregular. He explained that during the landing process, it was just as risky to abort the mission with a faulty computer as it was to continue with the landing. After carefully weighing the risks, they decided it was safer to proceed. NASA employee Charlie Duke relayed this message to the astronauts in space, saying, "We're going on that alarm." However, within minutes, the computer sounded another alarm with a code 1201, since it was the same type of warning they chose to continue. Duke radioed, "It's the same type of alarm, so we're going." At this point, Buzz Aldrin was fully focused on monitoring the instrument displays and calling out crucial data such as speed, altitude, and other important information. Meanwhile, Neil Armstrong took manual control of the landing. However, they encountered another issue that slowly became apparent. They were not in the expected location. Aldrin later explained, "In the commander's window, there was a vertical line with marks on it forming a grid. This grid was calibrated to Armstrong's height and eye level. By referencing the computer's information, the commander could use this grid to determine the lunar module's position relative to the moon's surface. However, according to the grid, they were coming in long, meaning they were farther downrange than anticipated. Due to the uneven gravitational pull of the moon and the additional velocity gained during the undocking from the command module, Armstrong and Aldrin had overshot the predicted landing zone. Armstrong found himself confronted with a disappointing sight. Instead of the smooth and uneventful terrain displayed on the orbital maps, what lay before him was a sprawling expanse of craters and massive boulders comparable in size to trucks. Taking control of the spacecraft manually, Armstrong carefully surveyed the area, desperately seeking a flat and even surface. Charlie Duke, in a statement, revealed his concern about the unexpected turn of events. "I was observing the plotted path of our journey," Duke recounted, "and at an altitude of approximately 122 meters, Neil started navigating erratically across the lunar surface. It was completely different from what we had trained for and seen in our simulations. I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease, especially since we were being kept in the dark about the situation. All we knew was that they were following this peculiar trajectory." Little did Duke know that Armstrong and Aldrin were piloting their spacecraft under life-or-death circumstances. Not only were they deviating from their planned trajectory, but their fuel supply was also rapidly dwindling. As their fuel reserves approached critical levels, they soon found themselves just 60 seconds away from a mandatory abort. But the outcome of an abort was uncertain, and it remained unclear if they could even initiate emergency engine ignition and perform a forced staging at their current altitude. Controller Bales emphasized the perilous nature of the situation, stating, "You never want to go below the dead man's curve. It's an altitude where there's simply not enough time to abort the mission before crashing. Essentially, it's a point of no return. You're left with no viable options." Duke warned them that they only had 60 seconds of fuel left. Despite the concern this caused, Armstrong remained focused on finding a smooth spot to land. Meanwhile, Aldrin kept updating them on their speed and distance from the surface. He remembered how the control center must have been surprised because they usually expected the astronauts to have around 2 minutes of fuel left when landing. However, they were still about 100 feet, 30 meters above the surface when the 60-second warning came. This was a crucial moment. They were worried whether the crew would have enough fuel to land on the moon or if they would have to abort the mission very close to the lunar surface. As they approached the surface, they were only about 10 feet, 3 meters away when there were 30 seconds left. At this point, Aldrin took a quick look outside because he didn't think Neil cared about the numbers anymore. He could see a shadow of the sun behind them. The descent engine was causing so much dust at this altitude that Armstrong could only rely on the shadow and a few boulders sticking out of the haze to estimate the remaining distance to the surface. And then, a long metal rod connected to the landing legs made contact with the lunar plane, indicating their successful landing. A blue light illuminated the console, and suddenly, the tension of the landing was over. Once he safely touched down, he immediately radioed Mission Control, located in Houston, Texas, with the now iconic message, "The Eagle has landed." Descending the lunar module's ladder, Armstrong was captured by a television camera mounted on the spacecraft transmitting his progress back to Earth. This captivating footage was viewed by millions of people worldwide, eagerly awaiting this momentous event. At precisely 10:56 p.m. EDT on the same day, Armstrong placed his feet onto the lunar soil, etching his name in the annals of human history. But there was one intriguing fact about Armstrong's walk on the moon that only a few people knew about at the time, and which many people still have never heard of. So here's the thing: according to the schedule, Armstrong was supposed to sleep before embarking on the first moonwalk. However, he decided to step outside earlier than planned because he knew he wouldn't be able to sleep anyway. And had he walked on the moon without the necessary breathing equipment, he would have detected a strange odor resembling a mix of mustiness and sulfur. But luckily, he got to experience that smell when he returned to the lunar module. Interestingly, the lunar dust had stuck to his feet, spreading the odor throughout the cabin. He described it as the scent of wet fireplace ashes or the lingering smell after a fireworks show. Who would have thought that packing a scented candle would be necessary for a moon mission? Interestingly, besides the astronauts who have since set foot on the moon, no one else has had the opportunity to know exactly what the crew smelled. Even during subsequent missions, when samples of moon soil and rocks were transported to labs in tightly sealed containers, the smell had mysteriously vanished once they were opened back on Earth. Armstrong only noted that the moon's surface felt fine and powdery, yet it didn't pose any difficulty in movement. Around 20 minutes later, the other crew member joined in Buzz Aldrin, and together they embarked on a moonwalk that lasted a little over 2 hours. Armstrong and Aldrin installed various devices on the moon's surface during this time. One of these devices was designed to precisely measure the distance from the moon to Earth by timing the travel of a laser beam from Earth to the lunar surface and back. Another device aimed to monitor moonquakes and potential meteor impacts, which led to the remarkable discovery that the moon was a dynamic and active celestial body, far from being the lifeless entity that it was previously thought to be. With their utmost efforts, the astronauts gathered approximately 50 pounds of rocks in soil samples. Alongside this accomplishment, they diligently snapped numerous photographs of the terrain, where they also planted the United States flag. This commemorative plaque and the iconic US flag would become the subject of much debate and conspiracy. Skeptics and theorists, in their quest for answers, questioned why the flag appeared to flutter despite the absence of wind on the moon. Fortunately, this misconception was later clarified. The subtle movements of the flag were actually caused by vibrations transmitted through the flagpole. To ensure its visibility in the lunar atmosphere, the flag was specially crafted and reinforced, making it a vivid symbol of human achievement in the vast expanse of space. Armstrong exuded such calmness throughout his extraordinary lunar stroll, and he later described the experience as much easier than he had anticipated. According to him, it was as if the moon's surface embraced him with a gentle touch, caressing his every step. And remarkably, even to this day, Armstrong's footprints remain etched upon the lunar soil, undisturbed by the stagnant lunar air. However, one final task awaited Armstrong, which added to the significance of their mission. He was tasked with taking a walk to what is now known as the East Crater, located 65 yards east of the lunar module. This simple stroll became a monumental moment, as it marked the furthest distance traveled from the spacecraft during that specific mission, approximately half the length of a football field. During this captivating moment, Armstrong stumbled upon a lunar enigma, a discovery that he chose to keep secret until his passing. Astonishingly, the astronaut encountered what appeared to be an alien spaceship, bearing unmistakable indications of its extraterrestrial origin. Buzz Aldrin, the lunar module pilot and the second member of the mission's crew, also attested to witnessing a peculiar object trailing the Apollo 11 spacecraft. Unfortunately, the only visual evidence of the historic Eagle landing from that mission is a time-lapse movie captured by a 16mm camera installed in Buzz Aldrin's window. The camera's limited field of view and angle prevented it from recording what Armstrong saw as he piloted and touched down the lunar module. However, Aldrin's window provided a clear view of the object, which the team later speculated could be a UFO. Nearly half a century later, NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter LRO, which has been orbiting the Moon since 2009, managed to recreate new perspectives of the momentous landing. The LRO team reconstructed the final 3 minutes of the Eagle's descent, offering a glimpse into what Neil Armstrong witnessed during his lunar landing on July 20th, 1969. Sadly, even this remarkable recreation failed to capture the mysterious lunar encounter that Armstrong experienced. After returning to the capsule, Armstrong received an unexpected phone call. It was none other than the President of the United States, Richard Nixon, reaching out to him in a moment of historic significance. And in a fleeting conversation that lasted less than a minute, President Nixon conveyed his heartfelt gratitude to Armstrong for his extraordinary achievement.
One in their pride in what you have done, and one in our prayers that you will return safely to Earth.
He expressed admiration for the astronauts' courage and the groundbreaking nature of the moon landing. It was a brief yet powerful exchange between two individuals at the forefront of history. After the call ended, Armstrong described feeling a sense of pride and honor. And with their duties fulfilled and the weight of their accomplishments sinking in, Armstrong and his fellow astronaut decided to take a well-deserved nap. Resting inside the confines of their space capsule, they closed their eyes, drifting off into sleep with dreams of the celestial world they had conquered. However, a surprising hurdle awaited the crew. Due to the bulkiness of their spacesuits, they unintentionally broke the ignition switch for the ascent engine. But not even this could deter them from seeing their mission through, so they improvised by using a part of a pen to activate the circuit breaker and initiate the launch sequence. Finally, at 1:54 p.m., the renowned Eagle began its ascent from the lunar surface. Besides the scientific equipment they left behind, the astronauts also placed a plaque on the moon's surface. This plaque served as a symbolic message to all of humanity, stating, "Here men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon July 1969 AD. We came in peace for all mankind." Years later, Neil Armstrong would reveal that NASA had imposed time limitations on their lunar mission, but still made no mention of his surreal lunar encounter. He explained that the reason behind this decision by NASA was the uncertainty surrounding the spacesuits and their ability to withstand the extreme temperatures on the moon's surface. These temperatures could reach scorching highs of 260 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, while plummeting to bone-chilling lows of 280 degrees Fahrenheit below zero at night. However, Armstrong and his team faced a new challenge upon their return to Earth. They had been exposed to unknown space particles during their lunar adventure, which raised concerns about potential contamination. As a result, they were immediately placed in a specialized quarantine known as planetary protection. After the successful splashdown of their space capsule in the Pacific Ocean on July 24th, the Apollo 11 astronauts were swiftly transferred to a mobile quarantine facility. Although the MQF provided some comfort, such as comfortable chairs, bunks, toilets, and showers, it lacked the space required for elaborate cooking. The absence of a standard oven or grill was not only due to spatial constraints, but also to minimize the risk of fires in the confined quarters. In order to provide the astronauts with quick and hassle-free meals, NASA had to come up with an innovative solution. This necessity led to the development of the original countertop microwave oven. By harnessing the power of microwaves, astronauts could conveniently heat their meals without the need for a fully equipped kitchen. The success of this invention during the Apollo 11 quarantine became one of the catalysts for the popularity of microwaves in our kitchens today. And the first microwave oven used by the astronauts can now be admired in a museum in Oakland, California. Now, despite his initial statement about not reaching for the stars again, Armstrong's thirst for exploration remained unquenched. And so in 1985, he became a part of an exceptional group of explorers who were considered the best in their field. Together, they embarked on a remarkable expedition to the North Pole. His companions included the renowned mountaineer Edmund Hillary, the skilled aviator Steve Fawcett, and the talented photographer Patrick Morrow. Finally, on April 6, 1985, they successfully reached their destination. For him, this journey held a special significance. It was a chance to witness the Earth's icy pole up close, as he had only observed it from the surface of the moon during his previous remarkable feat on the Apollo 11 mission. This particular mission remained etched in his memory even though many years had passed since then. But in a surprising turn of events, the Smithsonian Institution made a fascinating discovery in 2015. It was revealed that Armstrong had kept a hidden cloth bag filled with the various small parts from the lunar module used in the Apollo 11 mission. Among the items were his waist tether utility lights with their brackets, an emergency wrench, and the optical sight that was mounted above Armstrong's window in the space module. Notably, the bag also contained the data acquisition camera that had captured the iconic footage of Armstrong taking his momentous step on the moon's surface. Armstrong kept this secret to himself for a long time, only to have it eventually discovered by his widow Carol. He'd even concealed this valuable memento from his official biographer, who had inquired numerous times about any keepsakes he may have retained from his historic mission. However, Armstrong never illicitly brought these objects back to Earth. He simply referred to them as a collection of insignificant items he wished to bring home. What are your thoughts on these hidden secrets that have just made the light of day? Let us know your opinions in the comments below.